You all got the book? Okay, great. So, to make things interesting, I'm going to read something from the end of the book, first of all, on page 97. Called Will. This is one of my favourite little suttas. It's from the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the 5 Nikayas which make up the Sutta Pitaka, called Will. Have you all got that? I'll read it out first of all, and then see what your comments are. Will. Meditators, when one is virtuous and when one is virtuous, one does not need to will, let me be free from regret. It is natural that one who is virtuous becomes free from regret. When one is free from regret, one does not need to will, let me be happy. It is natural that one who is free from regret becomes happy. When one is happy, one does not need to will, let me be joyful. It is natural that one who is virtuous becomes joyful. When one is joyful, one does not need to will, let me be tranquil. It is natural that one who is joyful becomes tranquil. When one is tranquil, one does not need to will, let me feel mental pleasure, the sukha. It is natural that one who is tranquil experiences mental pleasure. When one experiences mental pleasure, one does not need to will, let me enter jhana. It is natural that one who experiences mental pleasure enters jhana. When one has experienced jhana, one does not need to will, let me see things as they really are. It is natural that one who has experienced jhana will see things as they truly are. When one sees things as they truly are, one does not need to will, let me experience nibbida, as a turning away from the world and fading away. It is natural that one who is virtuous... There's actually quite a lot of little mistakes in here. That's why we're doing another copy soon. But I know what it really means. When one sees things as they really are, one does not need to will, let me experience nibbida and fading away. It is natural that one who sees things as they really are experiences nibbida and feeling away and falling away. When one experiences nibbida and fading away, one does not need to will, let me realize liberation. It is natural that one who experiences nibbida and fading away realizes liberation. The reason why that's a very important sutta, the first time I read that, it was a translation and commentary by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, and he called that book Nibbana is a Natural Process. I like the word process. You saw in here that there's no need to will. It's automatic. That from one of these things it leads to the other. And that's actually what happens in our meditation, especially those who go into deep meditation. It's not something you do. It's something which happens on what I sometimes call the driverless bus. If there's no self, no will, how can you ever become enlightened? How does it work? Who does it? And this is one place where it gives the answer. It just happens, in spite of you. One does not need to will. Enlightenment is a natural process. Okay, so now let's go to some other of these interesting suttas. I was going to read out today, and I did mention it to somebody on page 71. Is there any questions on that, first of all, enlightenment being a natural process? You don't need to will? If you, yeah, go on.
It starts with being virtuous. Is that intentional? Is that being virtuous? Is that really the start of the whole chain, or that's just
No. Being virtuous is something which you are conditioned by society, by your experience, like everything else. You're mindful, aware, and being virtuous, it doesn't make any sense not to be virtuous. A good example of that, I often teach people, if you can't keep like 5 precepts, at least keep 2 precepts. This is the 2 precepts based on advice given by the Buddha to his son Rahula. And that was 2 precepts: never do anything, including saying anything, which will harm or hurt another being, any sentient being. Don't do anything which will harm another. And the 2nd precept, don't do anything which will harm or hurt oneself. Who would want to hurt somebody else or hurt oneself? It doesn't make any sense. It's only for a lot of us that instead of being mindful, sometimes we get caught up with our passions and we're unmindful. And some of these desires, which in society are kind of emphasized and given a good name, things like revenge. I don't know why anyone would want to exert revenge on somebody else. What does it mean? You know, you always feel that they're guilty. And even getting angry. Is that a good thing to do to other people, get angry at them? How many times have people been angry at you? What does it feel like? Does that really help? So instead of practicing anger, which is more like our culture in our world, for a good example of that, often people said, you shouldn't let people exploit you. And I counter by saying, if I wouldn't let people exploit me, I'd never be in Hong Kong or anywhere. I'm here to be exploited by you. You shouldn't let people take advantage of you. No, please, take advantage of me. That's why I teach. That's the compassion part of it. It's my privilege. How many times when you have really helped me and given me something extra, is that exploitation? Or is that this beautiful opportunity to share and give? It's a sharing which I see and which I rejoice in. But revenge or anger, I often notice as a young man, when I got angry at somebody, I held a trial in my head of that person. Well, that's what they did. They shouldn't have done that. And the trial was just one-sided. I was the prosecutor, I was the judge, and no one was the defense attorney. That's an unfair trial. I considered what they'd done, or what I perceived they had done, which was often not accurate, and having prosecuted them, got all the evidence, even though it wasn't fair evidence, it was one-sided. And I was also the judge, and I hit the hammer on the judging bench, and they're guilty. I justified my anger. They deserved to be punished or whatever. And I thought that was so unfair. And these days, quite honestly, if you ever seen me judging somebody, I always try and find some mitigating circumstance. Try to get them off the hook, no matter how that hurt me. My job is to find forgiveness, not prosecution. And that's even the same. I kind of was doubtful, first of all, is this justified by what the Buddha said? If somebody had done a terrible, terrible act, when they passed away, would they go to some hell realm? Sometimes I thought, why is it that in Buddhism there's supposed to be a being which judges people at the end of their life and sends them to hell if they've been bad? That heavenly being, a heavenly being is called Yama, Y-long-A-M-A, and supposed to send many beings to hell. And I thought, if I was that god Yama, and I saw someone who'd done some terrible, terrible evil act, well, could I send him to hell? No way. If you're a heavenly being, you've got kindness, compassion, you never want to send anybody to some lower realm. So how can that be justified? How can it be explained? And I thought I was kind of going against the Buddha's teaching, first of all, when I taught that. And there was good old Ajahn who said, no, Ajahn Brahm, you're correct. This being Yama, he doesn't judge anybody. He just makes you remember, bring it to mind. Make you recollect the things you've done, good and bad. And then it's up to you to decide what you need to do. No one ever sends you to a hell realm after death. Basically, you decide to go there yourself. You want to, people seek for some punishment. They think that's what they deserve. But does it ever help, punishment? Honestly, kindness is what helps. Where I actually saw that, and sort of just justified again, was when I went to Indonesia, the first time I visited Borobudur as a monk. The monk in that area, who's a very senior monk, I think he's a head monk in Theravada in Indonesia, Venerable Sri Panyawaro. He's a very lovely monk, and we became very good friends. Even I remember him telling me once, one of those books which is available outside, I hope it is still available, the Art of Disappearing. Remember, as soon as that was published, and I just happened to be close by, he came to see me and said, that's the best Dhamma book he's ever read. And when he said something like that, and he was a very senior monk, I was very touched. But also, I do remember him giving me the guided tour of Borobudur, the stupa there, for the very first time. And one of the sculptures there was of this man having this razor wheel cut his head. And have you seen some of those iconography of Buddhist hells? People look at those first of all. I don't know why. But it's the same as in UK. If ever you go visiting like a castle, people usually go to the dungeons first of all, before they go and see the sort of palaces and things which are upstairs. I don't know why people do that. But nevertheless, the carvings of the hell realms were at the bottom level of the Borobudur stupa. I remember Venerable Sri Panyawara was showing me this carving of a man in great pain, having his head cut continuously by a razor wheel spinning around. And the story behind that was when he was in the human realm, he pushed his mother over, and his mother was hurt. And because of that, this man had to endure, I think it's like 300 years of pain being cut by this razor-sharp wheel. And another man came who'd pushed his mother over, and the man who was already being tortured almost for 300 years now said, I was told when this punishment started, in 300 years' time, another man who did the same type of bad, harmful effect would come and would take over being cut by this wheel. And at that point, the wheel lifted from the man's head had already been punished, and went into this new man's head for another 300 years. And this new man said, wow, this is so terrible. Out of kindness, compassion, it's really terrible to push your mother over. And so I will take not just my own punishment, but the next two punishments as well. Let this razor wheel punish me for 900 years. He said that out of compassion, out of kindness, to take other people's punishment on his head. And from that thought of compassion, the razor-sharp wheel exploded, and he was free from the hell realms and went up to a heaven realm. And that's a story which is carved into the stone at Borobudur in Java for everybody to see. And that's why I sometimes say the doors of any hell realm are always open. When you can have some compassion for others and some forgiveness for yourself, you can't exist in a hell realm. Your mind doesn't belong there. So immediately you'd go up to some heaven realm. And that's also the reason why, as many of you ask sometimes, I ask for years, why is it that a stream winner, a soul one, can never ever get reborn in a lower realm? They cannot get reborn in a hell realm, no matter what they've done. The reason is because being a stream winner means you've let go of this idea of a self. So much so that punishment does make no sense to you. You're free from punishment because you can't punish yourself. So in this particular case, where was I going with it? This particular case of a person who is virtuous, after a while it's a common sense. It's not that you've seen something new. It's all those things which disturbed you in the past, which covered over wisdom, are released enough you can actually see what the truth is. Can I tell this story which I told you at lunchtime today? This is one of the times when you see how practical this is. Some of you have heard the story before, but when I was a young monk in Thailand, and when I was going on this tudong, this was in 1979 I think, the Vietnam War had finished, but there were still some insurgents in Thailand. These were mostly Thai students who had been protesting against the government in Thailand, and they'd seen many of their friends sort of killed. You know, when military in plain clothes apparently entered Thammasat University. I was a monk at that time, and I remember one of the monks, he was a very young monk, younger than me, was going to ordain as a full monk. He was in Bangkok doing visas, and he saw some of the things which happened. He was disgusted so much of seeing little students being thrown into a fire alive. And he said, I just cannot stay in Thailand. As many people were very upset with what they saw. But then they decided to run away into the jungle. They got their arms, their guns and stuff from across the border. That was now run by the Pathet Lao, Khmer Rouge and Viet Cong. So it was easy to get ammunition and guns. But then they were organising themselves to basically overthrow the government. And those areas were known as pink areas. And that's what they told me. And when I was walking and staying in the jungles in those areas, I knew it could be dangerous. Because they'd already, some of those insurgents, I don't know if that's the right word you call them, but they had actually killed some monks who were wandering in the forest. And they even said they tortured the senior monks. So I had to be careful. When I talked with the soldiers would say, in that mountain over there, that's where the insurgents are, that's the pink areas. That mountain over there is safe. You can go over there and meditate however much you want. So why was it the soldiers, they knew where the insurgents were? Why didn't they do anything about it? They did, they had a strategy. The strategy was non-violence. These are soldiers telling me this. And said the non-violence meant they knew where they were, they just kept an eye on them. No, but they watched, but they never did anything. And they knew that whenever any of those insurgents, because if you killed any one of those insurgents, they'd have brothers and friends. Two more of their family would join in. In other words, it would make the insurgency stronger. So instead, they had this non-violence and also amnesty. The amnesty was one of the most impressive parts of this strategy, because anyone could give in their guns. Doesn't matter what they did, they'd be given amnesty, 100%, no questions asked, and go back to the university, to their school, go back to their farm, and nothing more would be said. And the last part of the strategy was when I was even there, you could see how they were building dams up in the hills, and the small ones, to provide a constant supply of water, for the villages. So they started to have 2 crops of rice a year. You could see they also built roads so they could get out to buy supplies and get back again. And they had, the other thing which they were doing was having like medical centres, so they could upgrade the health of the villagers. All done, the government was doing this, His Majesty the King of Thailand was funding this, and the place was getting more comfortable to live. And so I remember some of the soldiers telling me, it was fascinating, being in such places, because the Thai soldiers would come with their M16s, the big guns, but they would never bring their guns into my presence. They would go about maybe 10 meters away, they'd see I was a monk, and they would put their guns against the trees, and then they'd come and pay respects and just have a chat about the Dhamma. They would never actually have the guns basically in my presence. That's a kind of respect which they gave to monks. And I'm glad they never brought them into my presence. If I told a bad joke, I don't know what would happen to me. But anyhow, so they had those two. That's it, that threefold strategy: non-violence, amnesty, and actually upgrading the areas to how the villagers wanted them to be upgraded. And so one by one, the soldiers, the insurgents gave themselves up and immediately given amnesty, back to the village, no questions asked, off you go. And soon there were so few people fighting the government that even the leaders of the insurgency gave themselves in. They were also given amnesty, 100% amnesty. Actually, it was more than 100% amnesty, almost like 150%. They weren't put against a wall and shot. They were just offered these really good positions in the Thai government. You've been fighting against us. Now please use your resources, your energy. You're really smart. Come and fight poverty, fight diseases, fight all these things the villagers want you to fight for. So they're all given good jobs. They weren't even put for a day in jail. And as I said to you at lunchtime, some of those, actually it was when I gave a talk in Sydney, the Thai consul was there, not the Thai ambassador, the consul. And when it was question time, he put his hand up and said, I just want to add something more. At that very time I was giving this talk in Sydney, he said 2 of those insurgents who were fighting to overcome the government in Thailand are now ministers in our government. They did not waste resources. People were very motivated to try and do good. Why waste them? Now they were ministers in the government rather than against the government. And I thought that was a beautiful way of dealing with problems. That was a Buddhist way of dealing with a problem. People really wanted to do good for something. Let's get them on board and help out. That was how the insurgency sort of disappeared while I was there. It was dangerous, but these were people highly motivated. Let's work together rather than work against each other. Anyway, why did I say that anyway? Anyway, that's just how that kind of forgiveness, punishment, never makes any sense to me. Punishment usually means you seek revenge, and the problem keeps on going on. So if anybody ever hurts you or harms you, please look at them as when the mosquitoes used to bite me in Thailand so much. And I said to Ajahn, can we not get some mosquito repellent or something? And what he told me, he said, from this day on, please look at those mosquitoes as your teacher. Please call them Ajahn mosquito. So if you've got someone who always causes you difficulty, they're your teacher. They're telling you a lot about how to live in this world without anger, without seeking revenge, without any ill will. It's amazing how many teachers there are around. If there weren't that many teachers, I'd feel guilty about going back to Australia. But I leave you with many, many teachers here. Okay, anyway. So basically virtue, when you become sensitive and wise, it becomes an obvious thing to do. Not because you have to, not because you're afraid of punishment, because I don't want to punish others. But sometimes people say that's not practical. In the real world, how can you train somebody? Now I come across a story of this trainee in Bodhinyana monastery. When I took over as the abbot, he came to see me early in the morning. He was an 8 preceptor, the first stage of training to eventually become a monk. So when he came to see me, made an appointment, he said, I need to talk to you now. I haven't slept all night, he said. I feel so guilty. I did a terrible thing. He said, last night I was hungry and I went to the kitchen in our monastery. No one was there, maybe at 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And I made myself a sandwich. I'm sorry. I was hungry. I didn't just make myself a sandwich, I ate it. And this guy just felt so guilty. And I told him, okay, thank you for telling me. That's the most important part. If you make a mistake, please let somebody know. Don't hide it. And he said, what are you going to do to me? Do I have to leave? I really want to become a monk. I was just hungry, that's all. And I told him all the things in the evening which you can eat. Chocolate, cheese, honey, fruit juice. This is monk's rules. Don't ask me why, but this is what you can eat. There's so many things you can eat, but also at lunchtime make sure you eat a bit more so you don't get hungry in the evening. And I said, now you can go. He said, is that it? Aren't you going to punish me? So we don't do punishments in Buddhist monasteries. That's something which really impressed me when I first learned thoroughly about the rules for monks. You don't get punished. And so he said, no, that's not good enough. I need to be punished, he said. If you don't punish me, I just know my character, I'll do it again. So he put me on the spot. He needed a punishment. So I thought very quickly, and I came up with this very innovative punishment. I'd just been reading a book about the history of Australia and how many of the early settlers in Australia were convicts. And if they made a mistake, they were punished brutally with a whipping by this instrument they called the cat of nine tails. Have you heard of that before? The cat of nine tails? And so I said, just by coincidence, I told him, I've been reading this book this morning, and I think if you want a punishment, this is Australia, so we'll give you 30 strokes of the cat. And that's when his face went white. So I shouldn't laugh. He really thought that Ajahn Brahm was going to flog him. And then I explained to him. He was really paying full attention. So in this monastery, the punishment of 30 strokes of the cat is this. In our monastery at that time, we had 2 cats, very beautiful little cats. Find one of them and stroke it. 1, 2, 3. You need to learn some compassion. That's your punishment. So in the monastery, we used to always sentence people, if they're really bad, 50 strokes of the cat of... But these days we don't have any cats over in Bodhinyana Monastery because they destroy too much wildlife. So these days I've changed it to 50 strokes of the teddy bear. Because it's just a lack of compassion. And when you teach people compassion and kindness and the value of forgiveness, that's far more effective. So that's the Buddha's punishment. So if you do anything wrong here, that's what you're going to get. 50 strokes of the teddy bear. That makes sense to you? It's actually far more effective. I'm sorry, I'll just... Anyway, does that make sense to you? Okay. Now what I was going to do, what page was that, 60? 71, thank you. Sorry for making a mistake like that. I'll sentence myself to 10 strokes of the teddy bear. Okay. Now this, if you see on page 71, they've got Nibbana through Anapanasati. And you know what Anapanasati is? There's lots of Pali in here, simply because when you're trying to find translations, sometimes the translations never have the full power of the original. And Anapanasati does actually mean just along with the breath mindfulness. And Apanasati. What does Pana mean? You don't know? Haven't you never actually chanted Panatipata Veramani? Pana means living beings. Why do they call them living beings? What is a living being according to Buddhism? It means a being with breath. The Latin word for having breath is animalis. That's where we get the word animal from. There's so much similarities between the Indian language and the Latin language. They have the same kind of format, same sort of grammar, and many words the same. Animalis, in Pali, Pana, is breath, but it's also life. What about Nibbana? What does Nibbana mean? Would you have to be a Buddhist scholar to understand what Nibbana was in the time of the Buddha? Absolutely not. Even kids would understand what Nibbana meant. We have this even chant which we do. It's called the Ratana Sutta, one of the core Buddhist chants, which basically women in Sri Lanka, they hear that all the time. They chant that in their school, and they know the Ratana Sutta so well. And a part of the chant is, I've got to remember it now, it's Nibanti Dira Yatayang Padipo. I'm not just trying to impress you with the fact that I know a language which many of you don't, but what it meant, that chant, that someone who is actually a stream winner, Nibanti Dira, they're going to Nibbana, for sure. Just like the flame of a lamp. Because that's what Nibbana was used by. If the oil lamp went out, the little daughter would run to Mummy, 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 the oil lamp has Nibbanaed. That's the usual meaning of the word. It went out. That's why the Buddha uses the simile of a lamp to describe to people what Nibbana means. Like in the Aga Uwachagota Sutta. In that sutta, we're teaching this wanderer, Vachagota, about what Nibbana is. He asks, where do people go once they've been in Arahat and they Nibbana, and they pass away? Where do they go? And the Buddha answered, I'm just going to adapt the answer, but it's pretty much accurate. Suppose you were watching like the flame of an oil lamp. What actually is that flame? It's just the sum of three causes. The heat, the wick, and the oil. When those three come together, there's a wick, there's the oil, and there's heat, you get a flame. What happens if one of those three causes just vanishes? The oil is all used up, or the wick is burnt out, or a wind blows the heat away. Where does that flame go? This is pretty much how the Buddha said it. If it's been a very good flame, will it go to a heaven realm where all flames live happily ever after? If it's been a bad flame, does it go to some hell realm where it has to be tortured all the time? Where do good and bad flames go once they go out? And even Vajragota said, that idea doesn't apply. It doesn't go anywhere, it just goes out. It's exterminated, it's terminated, it's finished, it's gone. And that's exactly what the Buddha said. What is a human being? It's just these 5 courses coming together. The body, the Vedana, I usually translate it as experience, perception, will, and consciousnesses. They all come together and you get this thing called what we call a being, a Gerald, a Freddie, a Della. Got your head up now, good. A Carol. Well, you get these things because there's just 5 things coming together. If one of those things wears out, used up, where does Gerald go? Nibbana. So anyway, that's what Nibbana means. And kids would understand that. So anyway, Nibbana through Anapanasati. Where's my clock? Oh my goodness. That's 40 minutes already gone. So, when mindfulness of breathing, that's Anapanasati, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it is of great fruit and great benefit. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it completes the 4 focuses of mindfulness. When the 4 focuses of mindfulness are developed and cultivated, they complete the 7 enlightenment factors. When the 7 enlightenment factors are developed and cultivated, they complete true knowledge and deliverance. That's enlightenment. That's how the Buddha started this part of the Anapanasati Sutta. What does that mean? Did you ever think that Anapanasati breath meditation is samatha? Is it samatha meditation, calm meditation? If it is, then it completes satipatthana, which is insight meditation, vipassana. The Buddha is actually saying they go together. If you complete the Anapanasati, you also complete satipatthana. You also complete the 7 enlightenment factors. So, here's the Buddha's explanation of what he said. And how does mindfulness of breathing, developed and cultivated, complete the 4 focuses of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthana? When the in-breath and out-breath are long, and you are aware that they are long, when the in-breath and out-breath are short, and you are aware that they are short, when you learn to experience the whole of the breath as you breathe in and out, when you learn to calm the breath as you breathe in and out, on those occasions you are mindful of the body, having restrained the 5 hindrances, haven't overcome the 5 hindrances yet, just restrain them, energized, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. In and out breathing is regarded by the Buddha as a body in the category bodies. That is why on that occasion a meditator abides mindful of the body, having restrained the 5 hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose and mindful. That's the Buddha's definition of the first of the 4 satipatthanas. And I would add here, how I've translated this is very careful. Sometimes the translation is, when you're breathing a long breath in, you are aware you are breathing a long breath in. When you are breathing a long breath out, you are aware that you're breathing a long breath out. When you're breathing a short breath in, you're aware to breathing a short breath in. And even when I recite it, I get confused, what's the next one? It's so complicated. That's why when I was doing this translation of the word of the Buddha, I made sure I abbreviated things which needed abbreviating. And I also, it made it quite sort of difficult when you think you have to do stage 1 first and then stage 2. Because sometimes, have you ever done breath meditation like that? Breathe in a short breath and then a long breath. What is a short breath? What is a long breath? Usually when I breathe, it's usually average somewhere. Does that count? Am I missing the point here? Have I lost the meditation because I don't do the long breath first and then a short breath? It's usually somewhere in the middle most of the time. Which is the right breath? It's a natural breath. It doesn't matter which one you're doing, short or long or middle or 2/3 or extremely long or very short. And should I be measuring this? And of course that's not how to do meditation. It's supposed to be relaxing you. Whatever length the meditation is. Just knowing whether it's short or long, it's an alternative. You don't have to do both. Sometimes you can count the breath. Sometimes, you may know in Thailand, they ask you to actually to say Buddho with the breath. Breathing in Bud, breathing out Ho. Buddho, Buddho, Buddho. I've got time to tell stories. Does it matter if I'm a bit late finishing? Okay. Like this, all these tales of these forest monks. This tale was told to me by Ajahn, who died shortly afterwards. Very nice monk. He said there was one of these forest monks, very tough monk, and when he got into one village, he checked in with the local village because they needed to know if he was going to come on alms round in the morning, so they could get some food to feed him. And so they told him it's better he stays in the village that night because there was a tiger in the area, and the tiger had actually eaten a couple of the small children and also some of the water buffalo. So that tiger was on the prowl in that area. And this monk said, great, I'm not afraid of tigers. I'm going to want to stay outside in the forest. If you could show me some of those tiger trails, because they always leave their paths in the jungle, that's where I want to sleep tonight. He said, you're crazy. He said, no, I'm fearless. So that evening, they took him to a place where the tiger trails passed. It was a nice place where he could put his mosquito net and umbrella, and he started meditating. And he was one of the monks who did meditate using the word Buddho. So in the evening when it got dark, he started doing the chant along with the breath, breathing in Bud, breathing out To, Buddho, Buddho, nice and peaceful. And then he heard a sound of one of the jungle animals. Buddho, Buddho, Buddho. It started getting quicker. And then he heard this animal was coming right towards him. And it was a big animal. You can always tell if it's a big animal by how it crushes, the leaves and the twigs on the floor. And he started going, Buddho, 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 naturally. And then he couldn't resist getting his flashlight out and pointed it. And that's when he saw the tiger. And he wasn't chanting Buddho anymore. He was chanting tiger, tiger, tiger. And then, chanting tiger, tiger, he didn't know actually how this happened, but he was outside of his mosquito net umbrella. running towards the village. Tiger, 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 tiger. In Thai the word is Sirklong, 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 Sirklong. And there's a reason why it's against the Vinaya for monks to run. And the reason is because, first of all, his outer robe fell off. I thought you'd laugh, Della. Not just his outer robe, then his inner robe fell off. And then this monk who was not afraid of tigers was waking everybody up in the village in the middle of the night, shouting, "Tiger, tiger, tiger, tiger," without any robes on at all. And they said they never forgot that monk. So that's one of the reasons. Sometimes you see me just walking or bowing, and the robes get very loose. Imagine if I had to run. Oh my goodness, that'd be the end of me. So, anyway, instead of doing the Buddha or the tiger, 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 I remember Ajahn used to say they don't have to worry about tigers. There's no monk who's ever been eaten by a tiger. I thought, are you sure? How do you know that? Would the tiger confess? If the monk's eaten, how would you know? Just a monk went missing somewhere. But it was actually something much more dangerous for young monks in those days. And what was that? Many monks got eaten by Thai girl. Sorry for that joke. This is not the word of the Buddha, by the way. But anyway, the important thing here is those first two parts of Anapanasati, they're just alternatives. It's just giving the breath a bit more interest. Is it short? Is it long? How does it feel? Because at first, sometimes you need that interest. If your mindfulness is not strong, when it gets interesting, it's more successful when you pay attention to it, that you maintain your mindfulness. One thing which I've suggested, which has been very helpful, between your breaths, in-breath to out-breath, there's a gap. In-breath has stopped, there's always a pause before the out-breath begins to go out. And there's always a pause when the out-breath has come out of your body, and then there's the next in-breath. In that pause, which one is longer? Between the in-breath and the out-breath, or between the out-breath and the in-breath? Which is longer? No, you can't answer. You have to investigate and find out, because it changes. But what is important, it's a little trick to give you something to do, so your mind doesn't wander off about what time is dinner or something. So anyway, and then you experience the whole of the breath as you breathe in and out. What does that mean? I usually use my finger. Now I'm going to watch my finger. Okay, it's my right, but your left, okay. Going from the left to the right. Seeing it go in, go out. Go in, go out. Fast, like a short breath, or slow, like a long breath. Go in, go out. And that third stage is seeing the whole of the breath. That's where you see it at the very beginning. You watch it go all the way to the end. You can see the pause. And then you see it go all the way out. All the way in. All the way out. You see how your mindfulness has got stronger. You don't just see it in, out, in, out. From the very beginning of the in to the end of the in. That's the whole body of the breath. And calming the breath. That just happens again naturally. You can't help it. Even watching the whole of the breath, as you calm down, you see more your mindfulness is stronger, and when you see that whole breath, it naturally becomes very, very calm. And remember that first instruction which I gave, you no need to have any will. That's one of the reasons why I have to teach how I practice myself. So whenever I meditate, I never go looking for the breath. Never. Instead, I relax, get my mindfulness up. I just, calm my body with kindfulness. And then I just watch peace. Again, just getting mindfulness strong, because if you have a peaceful mind in this moment and you're still, your mindfulness gets very strong. That's all I ever do. And then I become aware of the breath naturally. It's the last thing which is moving. Nothing else is doing anything. And when you become aware of your breath naturally, without any will, you find it's always really peaceful. And because it's peaceful, it's delightful. Watch the breath go in. It's very calming and very joyful. Watch it go out, but you never force it. I never make it happen. I let go of all the other disturbances, and that's the only thing left. And that's why it becomes very peaceful and very beautiful. So it's easy to watch the breath. I just let go of everything else. And it's so delightful. I don't know what time is. So that fulfills the satipatthana of mindfulness of the body. Now, what happens? This is where I really get into the nice part of anapanasati. It's already very nice. But when you learn, this is the second of the four factors, so the second of the four satipatthanas, when you learn to experience joy, piti, as you breathe in and out, when you learn to experience pleasure as you breathe in and out, when you learn to experience the mental formation, piti sukha, as you breathe in and out, when you learn to calm this mental formation of piti sukha as you breathe in and out, on these occasions you are mindful of experience of Vedana, having restrained the five hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose, and mindful. For being mindful of the pleasure associated with this stage of breath meditation is being mindful of experience of Vedana. That is why on that occasion the meditator abides mindful of experience, having restrained the five hindrances, energized, fully aware of the purpose, and mindful. Now one of the interesting points of this, which I will point out, which few other people point out, is that these are the four. You start to experience piti and sukha, this joy and pleasure as you're breathing in and out. And when you learn to experience the mental formation of piti sukha as you breathe in and out, this was, why does the Buddha mention this, the mental formation? Because the breath, the feeling of the breath is never blissful or joyful, nor the physical feeling. This is how the mind experiences the breath. Before you were experiencing the breath as a physical feeling, the fifth of the five senses. Now you are knowing the breath. That's why sometimes people say, how come, as I said the other night in the Chinese university, you see a number 2 in the toilet which you just laid. If you need more information about that, you can ask one of the other people who were there at Hong Kong University. Why was that so beautiful? It's crazy. And I'm not a mad monk. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? That beautiful piece of feces which I just dumped in the toilet over in Jhana Grove years ago. It looked beautiful because my mind was very strong. It's how my mind experienced that. And this is actually why your breath becomes full of piti and sukha. You're not feeling it with your body in that physical sense of touch. You're knowing it with your mind. That's why it becomes really joyful. You're going from the bodily feeling to the mental experiences, which are really important in this way of meditation. And eventually the physical Vedana experience fades away, and the mind becomes very bright. You're knowing the breath, not feeling it as a physical sensation. That's where you fulfill the second of the Satipatthanas. When you learn to experience the citta, this is on the third group of 4 stages of Anapanasati. When you learn to experience the citta as you breathe in and out, when you learn to brighten the nimitta as you breathe in and out, when you learn to settle the nimitta as you breathe in and out, when you learn to enter jhana, liberate the citta as you breathe in and out, on those occasions you are mindful of the citta, having restrained the 5 senses, the 5 hindrances, Now, this is also how Anapanasati works. At this stage, you are still breathing in and out, but you're not focusing on the breath anymore. The breath has done its job. It's taken you to the destination of being able to free you of the 5 senses. So what you've got left is the 6th sense, the mind. Just like I often use the simile, how did I come to Hong Kong and be sitting here in this hotel? I had to catch an aircraft first of all. They wouldn't let me enter this hotel in the aircraft. The aircraft took me as far as aircrafts could take me, which was the airport, just a short distance from here. And then from the airport I had to get out of the aircraft and walk in my sandals as far as I could go. Then a car picked me up, and then they can take you to the hotel. And when you get to the hotel, you can't park the car in the corridor outside my hotel room. The car takes you as far as it can, and you park it, and then you start walking. Walked in my shoes, my sandals, as far as they could take me, and leave the sandals outside. Every step of the journey, you need the appropriate vehicle, and then you leave it and use a more refined vehicle. Now my vehicle is just my bare feet. So this is with the breath meditation. The breath takes you far, but eventually the breath can only take you this far, and then you become aware of your mind. At this stage the breath is still going in and out, but very refined. And so you're now with the mind, with the joyful citta, which is very beautiful when that comes up. And I put in little brackets here, how you experience that nimitta at this stage of sorry, I already gave it away. When you experience the citta at this particular stage of meditation, that is what I mean by saying you see this beautiful light in your mind, a nimitta. When you see that light in your mind, that nimitta, that's this seeing the citta. This is how you experience your mind. How can you experience something so refined as a mind when basically you know so little about it, except it's beautiful, bright, and kind of enticing? And the reason is because most of us have sight as our most important sense, which is why they will recognize me when I go to the passport control as I leave Hong Kong. They'd recognize me by the photo in my passport. That's how I look. Would you recognize me if I had a picture of my foot in my passport? I'm sure that I've got a foot like no other people in this world. Every foot is different. we're not sensitive to that. We're sensitive to how our face looks. I know fingerprints are different. That's why you can do an ID for your computer with a fingerprint. So this is one of the reasons why, because sight is our most definitive sense. Like a dog. And don't worry what you look like. And then they know your friend or foe. You know, and even a cat. You know, Bobo would know that, oh, that's Gerald. Because it will smell you. So, because human beings are mostly dominated by sight, we have much language to define and describe what we can see. That's why that when a nimitta comes up, it's usually as a light. That's just how we interpret this thing called the citta, the sixth sense. So you become aware of the citta. And then you learn how to stabilize it. Actually, no, first of all, to bring more energy and joy to that nimitta. And then to stabilize it, to samatha it. Samadhahang cittang. So the citta does not become concentrated. It becomes still. The beautiful light in your mind doesn't move. It becomes incredibly beautiful. And I say this, that many of you will see that nimitta. Many of you know why, you've heard me say this before. When you die, and you float up towards the light, what is that light? You don't need to be a Buddhist. Each one of you will have that experience. It's standard procedure. That's why many people who don't want your grandma or someone to die, you say, don't follow the light. Stay here. But many of you do, and that's what happens with either a near-death experience or actual death. You go to, why? What's going on? Your five senses with your body are stopping. They're ceasing. They're not needed anymore. You're dead. But what's left is the citta, the mind. And that's why you see its beautiful light when you die. If you don't believe me, when it happens, you can come and complain. You get your money back. But this is actually learning how to appreciate and experience this thing called the citta. And then liberating the citta, that's kind of a technical word which anybody who's studied Pali should know. That means entering the jhanas. That is the 12th stage of Anapanasati, of the 16 stages. So that's one of the reasons why that this Anapanasati, you only really get close to completed even the 12th stage if you can experience the nimittas and enter jhanas. That's how important this all is. And you complete the 3rd stage of Satipatthana. And I love it when the Buddha says that. Because you get all these people, unfortunately they claim to be teachers. And they say that they can teach Satipatthana. They're never taught what the citta is. The mind. Because they've never seen it, never liberated it. If you really want to understand, like the Buddha gave the simile of a goldsmith. If you want to find the properties of gold, you've got to purify it first of all. Isolate it from any other contaminants like tin or lead or something. So just gold, pure gold, at least 99.99% gold. And if you can see pure gold, then you can test it for all its wonderful qualities, like how malleable it is, how bendable, and how it doesn't really decay at all, it doesn't go off, doesn't tarnish. You need pure gold to be able to test it. And that's the same way to understand what your citta is, what the six senses. You need to have it purified first of all. And that's what the jhanas do. And once you have it purified and you emerge from those jhanas, then you learn to explore. And I love when I say explore, not to think about, not to contemplate, not to investigate. That's too much thinking. Just to explore. And I love the word explore. It's going to somewhere you've never been before. You don't know what it is. You have no words for it, only to know it's safe. You learn to explore impermanence in breath meditation. Anicca. Do you know what anicca is? What is anicca? When you think about it, you rely upon your knowledge. Oh, anicca is impermanence, coming and going. No, it is not. It's much more than that. If it was, many of you would be enlightened by now. It's not things which come and go. It's things which have come and disappear totally. For example, you're watching a TV, a show. Yeah, you know that things come and go on the TV. The channels can be changed. The image on the screen can change. That's not anicca, that's pretty normal. What would happen if you're watching the TV and then the whole TV vanished? The set, the controls, everything just disappeared. You know that's not covered by the warranty. It's not meant to happen. That's real anicca, which things which are supposed to be reliable, constant, but they're not there anymore. I'm going to go a bit further on this, spending a bit more time. Hope you don't mind. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to do it anyway. That's one of my favourite similes of what anicca is and how you get to understand what it is and its importance. And that's a simile, I've told a couple of people during interviews, that's the simile of the tadpole and the frog. Sorry, tadpole, frog and fish. How can a fish ever know what water is? You're born in the water, lived all your life in the water, and if you get pulled out of the water, that's by a fisherman, that's the end of your life. So, how can a fish ever know what water is? If you go to school or university, could you really know what it is? If you go to the Buddhist university, can you ever understand? I shouldn't go there, I'll be in trouble. You won't invite me back again. But a tadpole starts off life like a fish. Can't understand what water is. But the tadpole, one day, she develops legs and arms, and she doesn't know what she's doing, but she just jumps. And she lands on this dry land around the lake or the pond. Imagine what that must be like. This little tadpole spent all its life in the water and now is outside of the water on the dry land. Never had that experience before. Now, that tadpole, now a frog, can understand what water was. This strange stuff which has now disappeared. That's like a person who enters a jhana. For the first time in life, something has disappeared which has always been there. 5 senses, body. Now you can understand what these 5 senses in this body actually are when it's disappeared. How can even, like a doctor, have you done surgery? Even if you've done surgery, I've asked this of doctors. remember asking this doctor when I was, in the old days, allowed to go and see autopsies. We asked this doctor, who did many autopsies every day, how does that affect, please excuse me, but it was an important question. How does that affect your perception of your wife? And he said, he compartmentalizes. So a dead body was, to him, so different than a live body. But as a monk, we're supposed to see the connections. So sometimes you wonder if you are gone into these deep meditations called the jhanas, it changes the whole way you look at bodies and five senses. Your old perceptions of them change. You don't look at them the same way anymore. You know what it's like not to have a body, like in the jhanas. You don't have itchy noses when you're in jhana either. Excuse me. But this is one of the reasons why, to really understand something, it has to disappear first. You see it at a distance. It needs to be anicca for you to truly understand it. And the other things which we're supposed to know. You explore things fading away. You see things ceasing. In breath meditation, the body has ceased for a little while. And you see relinquishing things becomes much more peaceful when you don't worry about your body. You don't have the same fear anymore. That's why when many of you say, Ajahn Brahm, can we give you a checkup? There are many doctors here. Can we please take you for a physio? Ajahn Brahm, can you please? I'm not bothered. This is one of the things which happens. So this is the fourth stage of Anapanasati, and it also fulfills the fourth of the Satipatthanas. Have you ever thought that senior monks or nuns who've got a bit of a reputation, they don't think like us. They don't worry the same way we worry. They're going to get upset. They're happy no matter what. Why? Question is, why not? If you're going to be happy, that's why the Buddha was a happy monk. That's why his religion his path became so popular. You know the happiest man which I ever saw? He was crazy sometimes. Like crazy wise and crazy happy. The sorts of things which you got up to was kind of really made you laugh. And if ever I did something wrong, he would find it so funny. That is, I think, why he loved to be around Western monks, because we were so crazy sometimes. Not in a sort of deliberate way, but we did things all wrong. I remember like the Asian toilets we had. I mean, what would a Westerner would see that the first time, say coming from England, and what am I supposed to do with this? You're supposed to squat down on them. So they didn't know how to squat, so they'd sit on them. Honest. And so when they told Ajahn Chah, he just burst out laughing. Okay, many other stories, but I shouldn't keep going. I'll just really get into this. So anyway, that's Anapanasati and Satipatthana. Awareness of the breath, classic samatha method, which leads you to deep states of peace, and Satipatthana, which you need those deep states of peace. How on earth can you understand the mind? Now, vipassana, really understand it if you haven't experienced it. That's why you do need Anapana and Satipatthana. Insight and Vipassana will always go together. You can't do one without the other. So I promised, I would say that. You had an interview this morning, so I promised I'd keep my virtue and describe how Anapana and Vipassana will go together. Is that okay? Any questions? Just one? Oh, amazing. Yeah, go on.
Have you ever met someone that, like in the Buddha's time, there were lay people, a couple, right, that were awakened? Yes. No, there was two people that they were lay people that were able to reach steam enter.
Lay people, and after the time of the Buddha, and after the Buddha was enlightened.
After the Buddha, yeah, after the Buddha.
Oh yeah, of course.
Have you in your life met?
People who were stream winners.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what. To be a stream winner is forever. You can't suddenly not be a stream winner. That's one of the... There are two stages of stream winning. I hope I'm understanding you correctly. There's one on the path to being a stream winner. You haven't become a stream winner yet, but it's inevitable. And so you have to be a stream winner before you die. And the second one is you've already attained to being a stream winner. So it's already there. You can't go backwards. You can't say, may I not be a stream winner? Too late. That's why I say to people, anyone who is a stream winner, if you wanted to be a bodhisattva and put off your enlightenment, unfortunately it's too late. You can't do that. It's impossible. You see non-self, you're on this path. You don't need to will or do anything. You can't stop it. You're out of here. It's a one-way ticket. You don't mind because it's good fun. Was that the question you wanted to ask? Yes. Okay, great. Was the answer okay? Thank you. Any other question before we finish off and do interviews? We can wait till this evening. We have a little box outside for questions. But can I please ask you to write the questions in English, not in Cantonese? And please write them as clearly as possible. Because sometimes when I answer these questions, you look and, Gerald, what language is this? So please, and can I also limit it to one question each? We always get more questions you can ever answer. So just one, if you've already written a question, you think of a better one, search in the box, take your old question out, and replace it with a new one. Is that okay? Because when I read out a question, I really try my best to answer it as fully as possible. And sometimes you ask some amazing questions, and I like to answer them. They're inspiring and useful. So that's this evening. Is that okay? Okay. So let's finish off. And now we can, because it's the word of the Buddha, actually this time it's more word of me than the Buddha, but nevertheless, I always like to do a little chant at the end before I bow. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suwakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.